Thanks very much. So the title of this presentation is A Shared Archive of Process, Considering the Archival Benefits of a Digital Audience Feedback Platform for Contemporary Dance. So in this paper, I'm drawing upon findings from a research project that was undertaken as a partnership between the University of Leeds, Yorkshire Dance and Breakfast Creatives, who work in digital design for the arts, from February 2014 to February 2015. So since the completion of this project, I've been thinking about the potential of this platform in new contexts of archive, and I'm interested in the archival possibilities of the platform, and that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. So Respond itself is a digital platform through which audiences are invited to witness and feedback upon the creative dance-making process and enter into dialogue with an artist. The project explored whether such an environment could foster developed levels of understanding and critical engagement with contemporary dance, especially within non-dance attender demographics. Drawing upon data gathered during this project, I will discuss the potential of such a resource to enable new co-creative understandings of the dance archive to emerge. This paper therefore offers an exploration of a digital dance archive as a legacy and byproduct of artist-audience relationships that are cultivated via the online environment. So the title of the platform is Respond, and as noted, it's a digital platform through which audiences can engage with dance-making processes via a digitally mediated version of Liz Lerman's critical response process, a feedback mechanism that was devised in the early 1990s and that is still used in lots of different contexts today. The platform was constructed as part of a Nesta, Arts Council England, AHRC funded project, and aimed to understand and articulate the potential for such a platform to break down barriers to attendance for contemporary dance, stemming from stemming from Yorkshire's relatively low theatre-going index for contemporary dance. Exploring the role of a digital platform for facilitating dialogue and engagement between artists and audiences acknowledged emerging theories around notions of co-creation in particular and the perceived benefits of fostering a culture of constructive critical inquiry between audiences and artists. And this represented the overall aim of the Respond project in its original manifestation. But as I discuss in this paper today, I believe there are further implications with regards to the role of the audience member and spectator in the shaping of dance archival content and the function of Respond as a source of ongoing choreographic documentation. So the platform itself functioned through a digital adaptation of Liz Lerman's critical response process, and these are just two snapshots of two key steps in that particular mechanism. So this was selected in light of one of the core aims of critical response process being to deepen dialogue between makers and audiences, which is why this particular technique was selected for its context on the platform. So it was applied within Respond with a view to fostering co-creative relationships and more in-depth engagement with dance. It was therefore being tested as an audience engagement tool, and critical response process enabled a reversing in the hierarchies that are traditionally inherent in feedback for dance artists, making it more audience-focused in this particular context. So the shift in this facilitation of critical response process, which ordinarily occurs in a live context, afforded a more automated and autonomous process via the online platform. Respond enabled direct communication back and forth between the artist and participants, i.e. the audience spectators, via this structured process. Like its live counterpart of CRP, Respond provided the audience with privileged access to an artist's creative process in the same way that online dance archives are continuing to make aspects of dance-making process increasingly visible. So for two one-week periods in 2015, 3 groups of audience demographic, including frequent dance attenders, infrequent dance attenders, and non-dance attenders, were invited to undertake the 4 steps critical response process in response to video footage of dance-making process that was created by 3 participating artists. So there were 2 participating artists in the project, Robbie Singh and Hagit Yakira, and later in 2015, dance artist Lucy Suggett also made use of the platform. And each of these artists has had a unique approach to soliciting dialogue between their process and their audiences. And so what is of interest to me here is how the brokering of a relationship via the online platform might be considered in relation to the digital dance archive, adding a new dimension of shared dialogue that is yet to be explored in this particular context. So traditionally, archival practices and procedures such as provenance and records appraisal are fundamental to the acquisition of material into an archive, and these have been linked to the social context within which they are placed. These processes form part of the lexicon around the archival process as being highly selective and hierarchical. For Jacques Derrida, the archive exists at the unstable limit between public and private as a liminal entity. Such ideas are worth considering in the context of Respond and digital dance archival practices, considering that archival theorist Brian Brothman claims that archival activities mirror a hierarchy of categories of social values. He claims that it is the social process which establishes what has high, enduring value, what is of transient value, and what is simply rubbish. That's 1991, page 81. For Brothman, the archive is associated with the collective memories of a given society, which implies a sense immediately of shared ownership and understanding within the archival space. As such, online spaces for dance content are increasingly visible and have contributed to new tropes of value and enabled access to the many layers of knowledge, expertise, and ownership that are embedded in dance-making practices. The Digital Dance Archive has enabled what Natalia Essling has described as, and I quote, an innovative turn in archiving strategies that arguably capture dancing process. This, she claims, is because visual recordings offer themselves as expanding mediums through which multiple viewings of the live dancing bodies are permitted. With the availability of online dance content through digital archives, questions have been raised with regards to how an artist makes choices around practices of documentation, preservation, and how such practices are negotiated into the archival environment. In the case of Respond, therefore, the choices around documentation offer an interesting dimension into the practice of how creative processes are shared with audiences, especially when considering the backdrop of the archive as a social process in the identification of value. For Respond itself to function appropriately between artists and audiences, the artists were required to submit 5-minute short video clips, there we go, at 2 different stages in order to provide the context for the critical response process. The way in which these videos were formulated became an important consideration for the artists as they became increasingly focused upon assisting the audience's understanding of the creative narratives simultaneously with their unfolding in the studio. Dance artist Lucy Sugger explained how the process of selecting material for a film of a targeted length as such had a direct impact upon the scope of the feedback and how much she was able to probe her audience in relation to the overall work. And what is significant about this approach is how it marks a shift in the way that dance archives have enabled new insights into the ordinarily hidden or private aspects of the rehearsal process. As Watley and Varney observed in relation to the process of creating the Siobhan Davies replay archive, the rehearsal process traditionally becomes obscured in the final manifestation of a work, and what is, I quote, discarded and what is kept is an unseen, unexplained cognitive process, a unique intuition that resides with both the choreographer and the dancers, which might be termed choreocognition. That's 2008, page 60. Digital archives such as Replay extend an invitation to, with expert composition, as Melrose 2007 and Watley and Varney have explained, and Respond might be considered similarly in the way through which it positions audience feedback within the time of making. These recent innovations into documentary practices in dance reveal the value associated with the multiple aspects of process. Increased interest in embodied knowledges or aspects of choreocognition are becoming increasingly apparent within web-based platforms. New approaches to documentation are, as Bermudez and De La Hunter have argued, largely dependent upon the digital interface. So innovation in practices such as Motion Bank, where digital inscriptions are being made and digital movement scores are deeply connected to those new approaches to documentation. Such innovation has interrupted the process of exchange that is commonly associated with spectating, and moreover challenges the experience of performance making and performing, both in and in the lead up to the performance event itself. For Lucy Suggett, when using Respond, the audience are not watching the piece of work, rather they function as observers in a research process. The shift in emphasis from product to process is implicit in the function of Respond, and where this has been applied with a view to engaging audiences, it simultaneously raises questions with regards to how the digital environment can serve as a platform for engaging audiences in the creative process and sustaining choreographic documentation. Respond originally sought to harness the online environment to encourage engagement with dance, based upon existing research that positions the benefits of digital engagement in the arts. In particular, Lynn Connor notes that online engagement can incorporate important periods of silence, which, and I quote, slow the pace and allow for a redistribution of power among the speakers, thus democratising discussion and enhancing the meaning making. That's 2013, page 79. Connor raises the important issue of timing here, and this became a key benefit in the digital manifestation of critical response process via Respond, which enabled artists and audiences the necessary time to reflect and consider their responses and discussion without the pressure of the live time-constrained context. The artists claimed that the value inherent in the written dialogue surrounding their work, as opposed to the verbal dialogue via the feedback system, came about because of how this explicitly differed from the live discussion, where it's less possible to take time to reflect and digest what audience members have said. Moreover, the artists, as a result, began to see the platform as a logbook or a record of their process, where they were able to return to user comments and compile an understanding of the overall feedback from each user and use that implicitly in their creative process. The digital manifestation of CRP therefore arguably facilitates a more in-depth understanding of the work, as it forces artists to excavate their process, and through the addition of a shared dialogue contributes to the artists' and audiences' ability to decipher and engage with the work. So the opportunity for audience members to witness and feedback upon the creative dance-making process and the shared online dialogue between artists and audience played a key part in the emergence of the concepts inherent to the process itself. As Lucy Suggett has explained, critical response process is a productive tool to make the work better because it helps me to realise how I want to engage with audiences, to build work and overcome preconceived ideas. It prompts me to look more into process. Managing the role and expectations of audiences was a central theme in the overall process itself. Different to the emphasis upon preservation, access and engagement that is more commonly associated with the digital dance archive, Suggett's insight that the audience are not watching the piece of work but that they are observers in a research process does not suggest a co-creative approach, but rather makes the audience implicit in this particular phase of choreographic development, or as being witnesses perhaps in the unfolding of choreocognition. In the case of Robbie Singh's work, Douglas, some of the responders began expressing concerns towards the final stages of the process about whether or not the work will be ready in time for the performance date. This behaviour further illustrates how the platform itself constructed a heightened sense of investment in the creative process. The way in which the audience commentary became present within the dance-making environment is also of significance, as it marks a further shift away from the spectator as what Susan Melrose has called an imagined presence towards a more co-present engagement. Instead, the distinction between spectatorship begins to overlap as a result of the shift from the imagined spectator to the presence of a spectator, but via the online environment. This was particularly the case for dance artist Hagit Yakira, who selected some of the audience feedback to share with the dancers, musicians and costume designers involved in the work within her process. She would read comments aloud to the artistic team during the rehearsal process, increasing the visibility of the audience feedback at the time of making. Yakira explained that the commentary was selected based upon how closely it related to what she was trying to achieve in the work, and therefore constructed a positive dialogue between the studio activity and the online commentaries. Yakira's suggestions reveal that she was less influenced by what audiences actually said, but more so about considering how the platform enabled her to invite audiences inside of her process. For Yakira, a particular strength of Respond was the way in which it encouraged her to reconsider the language she used to describe her work and how to ask questions of her audiences. Such ideas further support the distinction between the co-creation of value that marks a shift in the reception of value as something that can be understood as a shared process of alignment between artist and audience, which is perhaps afforded by these processes of digital environments such as those offered in Respond. Therefore, when considering the potential of Respond to act as an archival repository, the shared dialogue and consideration of the audience engagement with the work has the scope to bring new insight into the meaning of key archival ideas, innovation, and concepts in dance. In particular, Respond's place in the development of creative practice invites a reconsideration of the provenance of a dance work, whereby the audience become an active agent in the process and the dance-making concepts and development of ideas by the virtue of the digital environment. Instead of Respond therefore functioning as a co-creative platform, it might otherwise be read as a co-creative document of process, whereby a shared provenance and in the understanding and development of artistic concepts can be cultivated. Moreover, Respond offers a space for documenting and tracing the creative process that is carefully constructed with a view to facilitating the audience's understanding of the concepts and ideas, as opposed to simply being a byproduct of the creative process. Thank you very much for listening.